Part 16. The Threshold of Echoes. Chapter 1. The Sunlit Sounding Board. The transition from the lush, emerald embrace of the valley to the stark, unforgiving limestone of the high ridge was a fundamental shift in the frequency of Elara's existence. Behind her lay the meadow, a place where the midday air was heavy, with the scent of sun-warmed moss. Before her lay the threshold, a jagged, vertical gateway where the sun sat directly overhead and silence was a physical weight. As Elara stepped onto the first ledge, the sound of her boots against the loose shale resonated with a clarity that, though evasive, it was the sound of a cello C-string being plucked in a cathedral of blinding light, deep, resonant, and vibrating with an ancient sorrow. In the valley, sounds were swallowed by the softness of the earth. Here, under the unrelenting glare of the sun, the world was a sounding board of stone. Every crunch of gravel was amplified, echoing back from the surrounding cliffs, like a rhythmic interrogation. It was as if the mountain itself was, counting her steps in the bright heat, measuring the weight of her resolve against the gravity of the ascent. Each step became a drumbeat in this hallowed, open-air hall, a percussive reminder that she was a solid presence intruding upon a sanctuary of stillness. Chapter 2. Shattered Names in High Noon. The map of comfort she had carried in her heart felt thin as a thread, frayed by the sharp edges of the rising altitude. As the sun reached its zenith, casting short, sharp shadows against the mountain wall, Elara felt the first true chill of isolation. Despite the heat, the light here did not comfort. It exposed, leaving behind a harsh, golden clarity. She paused, her lungs burning with the effort of the climb, and whispered a name into the shimmering air. It was a name from her past, a word that represented everything she had left behind, but the air did not carry it away. Instead, she heard the name shatter against the jagged rocks, breaking into 1,000 sighs that spiraled around her ears. The echoes were distorted, stripped of warmth, sounding more like the valley's ghost, stripping her spirit bare under the gaze of the ancient, watchful skies. The voice of the past was no longer a comforting memory. It had become a haunting, hollow ring. Chapter 3. The Monophonic Frontier. In this high altitude, the music of her life was being rearranged by the day. The lush orchestrations of her youth, the polyphonic sounds of the village market, were being replaced by a solitary, monophonic line. The melody of the lonely frontier, the mountain demanded a solo performance, one where every mistaken pitch was magnified by the midday silence. She looked at her hands, which were now calloused and stained with the white dust of the limestone trail. They didn't look like the hands that used to turn the pages of the ancient journal back in the safety of her cottage. These were the hands of someone surviving a grueling metamorphosis. Every scrape on her knuckles was a note in a score she was writing with her very life. The threshold she stood upon was a physical manifestation of her internal state. She was too far from the beginning to go back, yet too far from the end to see the destination. Chapter 4. The Primal Vibrato. This was the liminal space, the threshold of echoes, where the self you were meets the self you are becoming. The wind picked up, a low, groaning vibrato that seemed to emanate from the bowels of the mountain. It played the crevices of the rocks like the F-holes of a giant cello, creating a sound so primal it made her teeth ache. Elara realized that she wasn't just hearing the mountain, she was being heard by it. The mountain was a witness. It watched as she struggled with the pack on her shoulders, which felt increasingly like a collection of unnecessary burdens. She began to wonder what else she could leave behind. Perhaps her pride, her fear of failure. The echoes told her that everything not made of stone would eventually be blown away by the mountain wind. Her mind drifted to the compass of dust. It didn't point north. It pointed toward the center of things, toward the truth. Chapter 5. Spiritual Alchemy of Light. Standing on this threshold, she could see the valley far below, shrouded in a midday haze. It looked like a dream she had once had, a place where people lived in boxes and followed the unchanging rhythm. Up here, the rhythm was anything but unchanging. The silence turned to white gold as the sun hit its peak, turning the granite peaks into glowing embers. It was a doorway made of wind and brilliant light, a portal into the next phase of her transformation. She knew that beyond that threshold, the echoes of who she used to be would eventually fade. Before she continued her ascent, she took one final, deep breath, feeling the vibration of the mountain settle into her bones. She thought about the first steep grade. It had taught her that momentum was a lie, only persistence mattered. Now, at the threshold, she had to learn the lesson of resonance. She had to become hollow, like the body of her instrument, to let the mountain's music pass through her without breaking her. Chapter 6. The Duo of Giants. The sun began its long, slow arc, but the day remained vast and open. Elara did not flinch. She had learned to dance with the shadows, but these were different. These were the shadows of the giants. As she moved forward, the echoes of her footsteps began to syncopate, creating a complex rhythm that seemed to push her upward. The mountain was no longer just a barrier, it was becoming a partner. The threshold of echoes was the moment she stopped viewing the ascent as a battle and started seeing it as a duet. The day let through only what was true. She stood there for a long time, a tiny speck of humanity against the infinite backdrop of the blue sky, listening to the echoes of her own heart until they were the only sounds left. The afternoon was unfolding, and with it the challenge, but she was ready. She was the cello, the mountain was the bow, and the music was just beginning. Chapter 7. Master of the Summit. She remembered the ancient journal and the faded ink that spoke of the silent guide. Was the guide a person, or was it this very silence that now enveloped her in the bright air? The threshold was the place where questions became more important than answers. Every wound was a grip, every failure a foothold. The echoes reminded her that even the wind eventually finds its way home. The air grew so thin that every breath felt like a precious gift. Elara closed her eyes and let the thin air music play in her mind. No longer a child of the meadow, not yet a master of the summit. She existed in the pure vibration of the moment. The threshold was her home now. She took a step forward, the golden sun guiding her path. The deeper she went into the mountain, the more the echoes transformed into a single, steady tone, a drone of existence. It was the sound of the universe breathing. Chapter 8. The Symphony Begins. Elara smiled under the vast sky and kept climbing. The stories of old were indeed being told, but they weren't about her past. They were about the woman who was currently walking through the light. Ahead lay the silent guide and the high pass whisper. Elara was no longer afraid of the echoes. She was the one making them. As she walked, the rhythm of her boots on the stone became a prayer, a song of ascent that would carry her through the next 84 chapters of her life. In the brightness of the day, she could still hear the faint vibration of that C-string, a reminder of the depth she had discovered within herself. The mountain responded with a silence that was an acceptance. She had passed the test of the threshold. Every movement in this grand musical composition was necessary, for now there was only the light, the stone, and the magnificent, echoing silence. She had just stepped through the most important door of her life.